They betrayed me, and now I have the evidence to prove it. I have held this secret close, a burden heavy on my soul, but no more.
My name is Robert, I'm 64 years old, and I never thought the day would come when I discover that my only son wanted me dead. It started so simply, so innocently. One Friday evening, Michael showed up at my house with a smile I hadn't seen in years. He carried a golden envelope in his hand, the kind travel agencies use when they want to make something look extravagant. "Dad," he said, pulling me into a hug, "Claire and I have a surprise for you. You've worked too hard your whole life. You deserve to finally relax." I opened the envelope, and inside were 2 crisp cruise tickets. A Caribbean voyage, 7 days across turquoise waters, with stops in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. My eyes stung with tears. It was the kind of dream I'd always postponed. There was always tuition to pay, mortgage bills, or emergencies to cover. A cruise was a luxury I never allowed myself. "Michael," I whispered, "this must have cost a fortune." "Dad, your happiness is priceless," he said in that soft tone that always melted me when he was a boy. And yet, there was something in his eyes. He couldn't meet mine directly. He looked almost too eager, too rehearsed. But I brushed the doubt aside. After all, I was his father. I thought, maybe this was his way of finally giving back. The plan was for me to leave 2 days later. I spent the evening folding shirts, packing shorts, and even buying sunscreen. But a voice inside me nagged, "Why now? Why such generosity all of a sudden?" The answer came the next morning, by accident. I'd forgotten my blood pressure medication in the bathroom cabinet. The taxi was already waiting, but I ran back inside to grab the pills. That's when I heard Michael's voice from the living room. He was on the phone. His tone was cold, nothing like the sweet voice he'd just used with me. "Yes, Claire. Don't worry. It's a one-way ticket. When he's out at sea, it'll be easy to make it look like an accident. Nobody suspects an old man falling overboard." My heart stopped. I froze behind the door, clutching the medicine bottle in my hand like a weapon. He continued, calm and calculated. "Dad's life insurance is 200 grand. Add the inheritance from the house, that's at least another 300. Enough to clear my debts and give us a fresh start." In that moment, it was as if the floor disappeared beneath me. My son, the boy I carried through sleepless nights, the young man I supported through every decision, was planning my death like a business transaction. I felt tears sting my eyes, but not from sorrow. It was rage, betrayal, and something else I hadn't felt in years, determination. If that was his plan, I wouldn't stop him. I would board that ship. I would play along. But I wouldn't die. I would survive. And when the time was right, I would make sure he regretted it 3 times over. Because if Michael thought his father was a helpless old man, he was about to discover how wrong he was. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I left the house quietly, pretending I'd heard nothing. My heart pounded as I climbed into the taxi. On the outside, I looked like any retiree about to enjoy a vacation. On the inside, my mind was racing at full speed. Why? Why would he do this? I had given him everything. When his mother died of cancer, I'd been both father and mother to him. I pawned my watch collection to cover his college tuition. I skipped vacations, drove the same car for 20 years, and worked late nights doing freelance accounting, all to give him opportunities. And now he wanted me at the bottom of the ocean. As the taxi pulled into the port, I caught sight of the cruise ship. It was massive, 12 decks high, gleaming white in the sun like a floating palace. Families were laughing, children running with excitement, couples taking selfies before boarding. To them, it was a dream vacation. To me, according to Michael's plan, it was supposed to be my grave. But as I dragged my suitcase forward, a smile formed on my lips. Michael had underestimated me. For years, I'd sacrificed, stayed silent, let people walk over me. But during those years, I had also learned to watch, to listen, to think. I was not a fool. And now, with nothing left to lose, would use every ounce of experience, every scrap of instinct, to outplay my own son. I boarded the ship with one thought burning in my mind: let the game begin. I didn't go to my cabin right away. I stood on the promenade deck, letting the wind sting my face until the shock settled into something colder and more useful. Anger can make a man sloppy. Cold clarity can save his life. I pulled the little spiral notebook from my breast pocket, the one I've used for years to track bills and grocery lists, and drew a line down the center of a fresh page. On the left I wrote, what I gave. On the right, what he took. If I was going to beat my own son, I needed to remember exactly who I was and how I'd gotten here. What I gave. November 1998, $1,420 for pediatric oncology consults, receipts in the brown accordion folder, tabs, 1998, medical. March 2003, $9,300 Columbia University spring tuition top-up, cashier's check copy in Education, Michael. August 2007, title transfer, sold my Buick for $3,100 to cover his off-campus housing deposit, DMV carbon copy stapled to rent contract. January 2014, $12,000 emergency loan when he lost a freelance client, wire transfer confirmation #A4K, 1129 in bank statements. August 2019, added him as contingent beneficiary on life insurance when the premium jumped, I paid it anyway, policy renewal letter, blue folder. Every December for 20 years, $500 Christmas put aside in an envelope marked Michael, even the lean years after his mother died. What he took. Trust, first. Then time. Then the promise that blood means safety. It sounds sentimental written out like that, but for me it wasn't poetry, it was exhibits. Dates. Numbers. Paper that lives in labeled folders because that is how I survived widowhood and raising a boy alone. I filed, I paid, I kept order. I've always believed that when a man is in trouble, he should count what he has. I had more than grief. I had a lifetime of documentation and the discipline to use it. I went to the elevator and pressed 8 for my deck. The hallways smelled like lemon cleaner and expensive perfume. My cabin was nicer than any hotel I'd ever stayed in: queen bed, small sofa, heavy curtains, a private balcony where bright water slapped the hull 5 stories below. I set my suitcase on the bed but didn't unpack. I pulled the curtains shut first. No silhouettes, no invitations. I took out my phone and opened the Notes app one use for taxes. New folder, cruise, evidence. New file, timeline. I typed the overheard words exactly as I remembered them, down to the pauses. It's a one-way ticket. When he's out at sea, it'll be easy to make it look like an accident. Dad's life insurance is $200,000, with the house, at least another $300. Time stamp, location, my living room, parties, Michael and Claire, speakerphone, my state, unseen witness. I'd learned a long time ago in long meetings and longer hospital corridors that details win arguments. Maybe they also win survival. While the phone was out, I scrolled to insurance, Robert, and took a picture of the policy letter that lists the death benefit. If anyone questioned motive later, I wouldn't be waving feelings, I'd be showing numbers with the company letterhead. I added a photo of my will's first page, the one that still listed Michael as beneficiary of the house. My stomach turned seeing his name in black ink. I didn't tear it up. Not yet. Paper is leverage until it's a noose. The ship sounded 2 short horn blasts and began to slide from the pier. People on the dock waved napkins and postcards. I stood inside the room, watching through a tiny gap in the curtains, hand braced on the wall to feel the rumble of engines through steel. It steadied me. When the shoreline fell away, I sat at the desk and did something that would have embarrassed me a week earlier. I wrote my life like a ledger. Assets on one side, tax returns, mortgage payoff letter, 2016, clean credit score printout, last month, the quiet reputation I had at my neighborhood bank after 30 years of never missing a payment. Liabilities on the other, a son who lied, a daughter-in-law who smiled thin and said I should get out more, and the fact that I was alone on a ship with railings and no cameras on private balconies. I kept the tone factual. It kept the fear from expanding. I remembered the first big bill of my marriage, the maternity charges when Michael was born. I'd kept that invoice too, although I don't know why. Maybe because his mother and I had laughed over how a single aspirin was billed at $8. I wrote that date down as well. If this ended in a courtroom, I wanted the story told from the first breath to the last invoice. Not for the judge. For me. Grief is a fog that pretends to be air. It lets bad things sneak in. In the months before this trip, I had felt that fog return, the little lies from Michael about work being complicated, Claire's bright, will swing by next week, texts that turned into nothing. There had been a day, 6 months ago, when I walked into their house with a bag of groceries and heard him swearing on the phone about a marker and front money. He hung up too fast when he saw me. I'd let it pass. I wrote that down now with the date I'd marked on my calendar, June 14th, Michael agitated, phone call about money. I opened my paper notebook again and added a third column under the first two, what I'll use. Audio recordings, future. Screenshots of any texts from Michael or Claire, future. Cruise itinerary, cabin assignment, balcony note, present. Passenger services printout of ticket class and return flight status, to be obtained. Security camera coverage map, if possible. Names and roles of any crew who deal with me, witnesses. I'm not a detective. I'm a retired accountant. But an accountant knows the story that numbers tell, and how to assemble them until the pattern is undeniable. There on the ship's letterhead, tucked beside the pen at the desk, was a small notepad embossed with the vessel's name and my cabin number printed faintly on the bottom right corner for housekeeping routing. I wrote my son's name across the top and underlined it twice. Then I wrote one sentence I could live inside for the next 7 days. I will make him regret this 3 times over, morally, legally, financially. Morally, by confronting him with the truth of what he tried to do and removing the word "dad" from his mouth forever. Legally, by handing over clean, chronological evidence that even a tired prosecutor could run with. Financially, by stripping him from any benefit tied to my life. I tucked that page into my wallet behind my Medicare card. I didn't call anyone yet. Not the police, not a lawyer. Not because I didn't believe them, because I needed more than a frightened father's claim. If I ran screaming to the purser about a murder plot with nothing in my hands but anger, I'd be the difficult older passenger they placated with pastries. So I did the next practical thing. I took the ship's directory and circled 3 places: passenger services, internet lounge, main dining room. Services to verify my ticket and get a printer's ink on paper. Internet to send 2 emails and receive 1 receipt. Dining because a man my age makes fewer mistakes with food in his stomach. On my way out, I stopped and stared at the balcony door. The latch was sturdy. The drops of dried salt around the handle told me it had been wiped, not scrubbed. I slid the lock into place and tugged twice. Not tonight, I said to the glass. Not any night. The hallway was warm with the breath of 100 vacations. I walked toward the elevators and, out of habit, memorized the positions of the little black domes in the ceiling, cameras. You learn that trick when you park in the same garage for 30 years. I counted them, counted steps between them, counted who noticed me and who didn't. A man who is underestimated is invisible until he isn't. At passenger services I waited behind a couple arguing about a shore excursion. When it was my turn, I smiled the gentleman's smile older men use to calm young staff. "Good afternoon," I said, laying my ticket folder flat. "Could you print the full itinerary tied to this reservation, please? Including any return flight details." The young woman typed. Her brow pinched. She glanced at the screen, then at me. "Of course, sir," she said, purely professional. The printer spit paper. I asked for a second copy. She obliged. I slid one into my jacket, one into the notebook. Ink. Dates. A hole where a return should be. Evidence is how you breathe when fear wants all your air. I was breathing again. Tomorrow, I told myself, we verify more. And if the boy calls tonight, I'll be ready to let him talk. I told myself I'd act like the harmless old man everyone expected. I'd smile, shuffle my feet, complain about the buffet once, maybe win a small slot machine hand for the cameras. But the moment my taxi pulled away from the pier and the ship's horn faded, I stopped pretending in my head. I was already moving. First practical step, evidence. I opened the second copy of the itinerary I'd printed and took my phone into the tiny internet alcove the ship called a lounge. The terminals were slow and the Wi-Fi expensive, but a man who had worked late nights doing other people's taxes learns how to spend money where it matters. I typed a short, very plain email to a private investigator I'd met months earlier at a community meeting, Frank Harrison. He'd given me a card then and joked that if I ever needed someone to look under the hood, I should call. I hit send and attached photos, my insurance policy, the itinerary showing no return flight, a clear photo of the life insurance letterhead with the figure 200,000 printed in blue ink. Within an hour Frank replied, "Mr. Sullivan, received. This is serious. Transfer $500 as retainer and I'll start digging into Michael's finances. What's your number? Where are you?" I sent a short text back giving him my cabin and the fact I'd be off the grid at night. When Frank asked for the transfer details I logged into the bank app on my phone, still slow, still blinking under a weak signal, and made the transfer. The confirmation number popped up, wire 5A9-338. I saved a screenshot and immediately forwarded it to Frank. Paper trail. Always paper trail. I did something else I'd never done before. I bought a small portable voice recorder from the ship's gift shop. It was cheap, a little metal cylinder the size of a lipstick, but it recorded in clear WAV files. The clerk wrapped it in tissue and with practice cheer said, "Perfect for lectures or tours." I smiled and paid. It cost me $40 and a weird sense of crossing an invisible line. But survival is practical, not noble. With my recorder tucked under the pocket of my jacket, I returned to my cabin and sat at the balcony door. The ocean was a smooth sheet unfolding into sky. The sun made the water look like coins spread to the horizon. I taped the recorder to the underside of the balcony table where it couldn't easily be seen, but would pick up conversation if anyone ever spoke in the room. I pushed the curtains just enough to watch the railing without being obvious that I also made it a point to learn the ship's routines. Crew changes, trash pickup, night shift patterns. I asked for the security map at passenger services under the guise of, "Just curious, old men ask a lot of questions anyway." The young woman behind the counter printed a schematic with the public areas marked, and, crucially, I noticed the private cabin balconies weren't wired for cameras. They had cameras in the corridors, in main public spaces, in elevators. But a balcony, that was private by design, a blind spot. I photographed the schematic and the time-stamped printout. Evidence grows into a mosaic, a printer receipt here, a swipe card record there. A little while later my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael, "How's everything? Hope you're enjoying. Love you." I watched the screen for a long beat. Love. Funny word from a man who'd talk about me in dollars and percentages. I texted back, "Ship's good. Did you double-check return flight?" I hit send and waited. His reply came 5 minutes later, "Don't worry about that. Claire handled it. Relax and enjoy, Dad." I held the phone in my hand and took a screenshot for later. People say screenshots are petty, but in a court they're receipts. Then the call came. His voice came through bright, practiced, effusive. "Dad, you should try the steak in the main dining room tonight." He sounded too comfortable, like a man who'd rehearsed concern. I kept my voice steady. "Michael, could I ask you about the return flight one more time?" There was a pause. He swallowed something I couldn't hear. "We'll make sure everything's sorted, Dad. Just don't worry. We love you." It sounded less like a son and more like someone backing an alibi. I put the phone on speaker and, without announcing it, started the recorder under the table. It would pick up his voice clearly if he called again. If not, the screenshot and the airline printout were concrete. I saved the call log as well. That afternoon I walked the ship like a man taking inventory of a small town. I learned where the cameras couldn't see, where crew members congregated, and which staff had friendly faces versus blank professionalism. I took note of names: Patricia, Passenger Services; Tom, Head of Security; Captain Peterson, makes himself visible. Names matter. People are anchors in testimony. It was while watching the pool that I saw a man who didn't fit. He sat alone at the far end of the bar where people usually clustered in pairs, wearing slacks and a long-sleeved shirt though it was too hot for it. His shoulders were broad, his eyes stayed on me longer than chance warranted. I squared my shoulders and counted him as potential interest. I jotted in my notebook, "Green shirt man, observed at pool 1530. Approach? No. Monitor only." From experience I've learned a predator tests unattached prey in public places. If he kept watching me, that was information. Information is something you collect before you act. That night, as the ship took on a thicker color and the lights of the cabin corridors blinked on, I sat at the little desk and typed a formal letter to myself, one paragraph, dated and signed, "I, Robert Sullivan, witnessed Michael Sullivan on speakerphone, June 12, discussing the use of a one-way ticket and potential advantage from life insurance. This is recorded in my notes and screenshots." I printed it on the ship's small printer, my cheeks warm with a peculiar pride, and signed it. Paper with my signature has more weight than my recollection. I didn't sleep much. Once you know the hand that was dealing against you, ignorance feels like complicity. I slept in the chair in Carl's cabin. "Wait, Carl? Sorry, that's the next chapter." For tonight, I stayed awake on my sofa with the recorder humming quietly in the drawer and my board of evidence stacked in a neat pile: printouts, screenshots, a wire transfer confirmation to Frank, and the little recorder with a full battery. I told myself the next moves would be small and methodical. Contact Frank by noon, keep the receipts in order, and if Michael called again, let him talk. My plan was not dramatic. It rarely is. It was a ledger, one that could be read out loud in a courtroom. I had to be less a betrayed father and more an archivist of betrayal, because the worst enemy of a plot is chance. The best enemy of chance is preparation. I had the latter, and I'd make damn sure Michael learned the cost of the first. The morning after I'd printed my signed affidavit and taped the little recorder under the balcony table, I decided not to be a hermit. You get soft when you hide. Besides, loneliness makes the mind invent enemies that don't exist. So I went down to the main dining room like a man who wants to be seen as ordinary, orderly, polite, a little gray around the temples. That was where I met Carl properly. He slid into the chair opposite me as though we'd been friends for years. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. He had the steady look of a man who'd had to make hard decisions, business decisions, not the sentimental kind. We traded the usual niceties and then, like two old men who'd been at the same crossroads, our conversation skidded into territory most younger couples avoid: loneliness, widowerhood, the strange new world of being uncoupled in a sea of togetherness. I didn't tell Carl everything that first hour. A man's story unfolds when it needs to. But people like Carl, seasoned, observant, notice when a man is carrying a weight. He asked, softly, "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a breath and weighed two things: how little I trusted strangers, and how much I needed someone who didn't share my last name to corroborate what I suspected. I added a little truth and a lot of measure. "It's my son," I said. "He bought me this trip." I let the pause breathe. But he didn't buy my return. That was the moment I decided to risk telling him. He listened without a twitch. He didn't give me the pity that's worse than silence. Instead, he nodded like a man who's seen cunning in business partners and the same coldness in human eyes. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I told him about the golden envelope, the overheard call, the insurance numbers, the ledger of things I'd given. I showed him proof: the printouts from passenger services, the policy scan, the screenshot of the bank transfer to Frank Harrison. I tried to be clinical. Anger looks messy in a witness box. Carl didn't blink. When I finished, he reached across the table and laid his hand, warm and deliberate, on mine. "You did the right thing by coming out here," he said. "Pretend you're on holiday. Let them believe you're fragile. But don't be alone." He offered me his cabin without flourish. "My suite has a sofa bed," he said. "Stay there. We'll keep each other company. If someone comes looking for you in your room, they won't find you." Simple. Practical. Brave in a way that wasn't performative. Over the next hours, Carl became more than an acquaintance. He became evidence's second set of eyes and a human witness who owed me nothing. He wasn't the kind of man who wanted drama. He'd been in business for 30 years. He knew the value of documentation and the hazard of rumor. He suggested we organize the material so any investigator could pick it up and run. "Create numbered exhibits," he said, pulling a pen from his pocket. 1. Audio overheard. 2. Life insurance policy. 3. Itinerary showing no return. 4. Recorded calls. 5. Wire transfer to an investigator. 6. Passport/boarding copy. He had a methodical way of saying things that calmed me. "When you present it, make it clean. No emotion, just facts." Carl told me about his own betrayal in a quiet voice I didn't expect. Years ago, his business partner had embezzled funds. Carl had found the records and brought the man to court. "It's not that I enjoy that kind of thing," he said, "but you don't let predators take what's yours. Sometimes the only person who will act is the person who's been wronged." His story didn't pity me, its purpose was to give me perspective. That afternoon, while we moved my documents into his larger suite, Carl suggested something that felt strange and right: test the waters. He wanted me to be visible in public and watch for reactions. He'd sit somewhere obvious, on deck, in the casino, and I would be another face in the crowd. If whomever Michael had hired came close, we'd know. We started with small things. I sat by the pool pretending to read. Carl watched the bar. We ate at different tables but kept glances across the room. If someone followed me, he would catch it. After a few minutes, my eyes noticed him, the man in the green shirt, sitting alone, scanning the crowd like a quiet censor. He didn't belong. People on holidays glance at the sea, they don't fixate on one man for 30 minutes. Carl called it out without drama. "There," he said, pointing to the man. "Watch him." I did. He followed me to the slot machines. He moved his drink when I moved mine. He kept his shoulders turned so he could see me without looking overt. When I did the simple test, get up and walk toward the elevators, he rose too, not as one joining the flow but to shadow me. He boarded the same elevator and exited a floor above, close enough to be within an opportunist stalking pattern. That encounter confirmed what I'd suspected, but it also showed me the risk of being visible. Carl and I adjusted our tactics. We would gather proof by letting Michael and Claire speak into devices, by coaxing them into revealing their intent. Carl's steadiness made those tactics possible. He helped me set the little recorder more carefully under the balcony table in his suite, where, if a conspirator ever knocked on my door or called my number, we would capture their voice from a different angle. 2 recorders were better than 1. That night, after the ship had slipped into its slow lullaby, Carl and I compared notes like old detectives. He transcribed a few of my notes into a cleaner list and suggested we make copies and hide the originals in separate places. "One goes to me, one stays with you, one goes to Frank," he said. "Redundancy saves you from good men making bad errors." We talked strategy, how to bait conversation without sounding accusatory, what to ask passenger services, how to get a printed confirmation of my itinerary with all the stamps. He wanted to test whether Michael had indeed left the return ticket unbooked or if it was a clever trap he'd hope I wouldn't check. "You realize what you've done is dangerous," Carl said at one point, not in warning but as fact. "But you also turned an advantage into a weapon. They think you're helpless. That's their mistake." I slept that night in a bed that wasn't mine, and it felt like the first safe night I'd had in months. For the first time since the morning behind the door at my own house, fear had a plan. And plans, I'd learned in 64 years, could be enforced. What I didn't know then, and wouldn't learn until the next day, was that the man in the green shirt was not a random passerby. He spoke into a phone in broken whispers and relayed cabin numbers. He would make a call that placed him in my corridor 3 minutes after I'd tested the elevator. And his phone, as we would later discover, carried the fingerprints of a plot. But that was tomorrow's business. Tonight I had a friend, an ally, and a stack of numbered exhibits neatly filed on Carl's little desk. It was the most useful thing a betrayed father could have, proof held by someone who could swear he'd seen it with his own eyes. The next morning, the ship glided through turquoise water under a soft gray sky. Families in sun hats clustered at the buffet, couples posed for photographs on the deck, waiters balanced trays of coffee. To everyone else it was paradise. To me, it was a floating crime scene. Carl and I ate breakfast in his cabin instead of the main dining room. We'd agreed, the less I walked alone in public spaces, the fewer opportunities for someone to accidentally bump me over a railing. He brought a tray of scrambled eggs and fruit from the buffet. While we ate, we planned our first direct verification, my return ticket. "I don't like guessing," Carl said. "We need an official printout with your name and the words, 'No return flight' right there in black and white." "That's what makes it evidence," I said. "Receipts don't panic." After breakfast we went straight to passenger services. The young clerk from the first day, Patricia, was behind the counter again. Her smile was crisp and professional. "Good morning, gentlemen. How can I help you?" "I'd like to see my complete travel itinerary again," I said. "Full details." "My name is Robert Sullivan, cabin 847. She typed quickly, eyes flicking between screens. This time she frowned deeper. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "I see your cruise booking, but," she hesitated, looking at the monitor. "But?" Carl asked, playing the role of mildly curious fellow passenger. "Well," Patricia said carefully, "you have a one-way cruise package. There's no reservation for a return flight to Chicago. Normally, our packages include both directions." I felt the words like a physical blow even though I'd already suspected. Hearing it from an official employee locked it into fact. "What does that mean exactly?" Carl asked, keeping his tone mild. "It could be a system error," Patricia said. "Or maybe whoever bought the package thought about adding the return flight later. But at the moment there's nothing booked." "Who purchased the package?" I asked even though I already knew. She scrolled again. "Michael Sullivan, with a credit card in his name." "Is he your relative?" "He's my son," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Oh well, then surely he'll take care of it," Patricia said kindly. "But I'd recommend you contact him soon." Flights from Miami to Chicago fill up quickly. Carl leaned in. Would it be possible for Mr. Sullivan to buy his own return ticket now to be sure? Of course. Patricia tapped. I have availability on a flight leaving Saturday at 3 p.m., the day the cruise ends. The cost would be $750. I'll take it, I said immediately, pulling out my credit card. While Patricia processed the payment, Carl whispered, first brick of evidence. Michael deliberately didn't buy your return. That's premeditated. I nodded, signing the receipt. The ticket confirmation printed with today's date and my name in bold. I slid it into my folder marked Exhibit 7, Return. Paper doesn't forget. As we left the office and stepped onto the deck, the day looked impossibly beautiful, sunlight scattering off waves, gulls trailing the ship. It was almost offensive how serene it was. Every piece of proof feels like a knife, I told Carl quietly. I raised him. I believed in him. And now each receipt says he wanted me dead. I know, Carl said. But every receipt also protects you. You've already survived the hardest part, seeing the truth. The rest is documenting it. We walked near the railing, careful to stay in the center of the deck. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Good morning, Dad. How did you wake up? Did you sleep well in your cabin? I showed it to Carl. He's checking if you're still there, Carl said. He probably expects you to answer from your cabin so he can confirm his plan. I decided to test him. I replied, Good morning, son. Slept very well. I'm on the deck sunbathing. The ship is wonderful. His answer came almost immediately, That's good, Dad. Enjoy a lot. Have you explored the whole ship yet? Another strange question. Why did he care how much of the ship I'd explored? I haven't explored everything yet, I typed. Yesterday I saw the restaurants and casino. Today maybe the pool and spa. Perfect, Dad, he replied. Just be careful near the railings. Sometimes people get seasick and lose their balance. Carl read the message over my shoulder and went pale. Robert, he whispered, he just suggested how you're going to die, an accident near the railings. I know, I said, feeling a chill despite the sun. He's planting the idea, preparing the ground for when the news reaches shore. I replied to Michael, Don't worry, son. I'm very careful. I always stay away from the edges. That's what I hope, Dad. I love you very much and want you to come back safe and sound. What irony, Michael talking about wanting me to return safe when he'd planned for me never to return. I took a screenshot of the exchange. Exhibit 8. During the rest of the day Carl and I elaborated our plan in more detail. We decided we needed more recordings, more proof of Michael's true intentions. We also determined it was crucial to identify if someone on the ship was working with him. Carl suggested we watch for any crew member or passenger who showed special interest in me. That afternoon, while we were at the pool, I noticed the man again, the one in the green shirt. This time he sat at the bar wearing long pants despite the heat. Every time I looked at him, he quickly turned his gaze elsewhere. Carl, I whispered, that man at the bar, notice he's watching us. Carl turned discreetly. Yes. And you're right. His behavior is suspicious. Let's do a test. Carl got up and walked to the other side of the pool as if going to the restroom. I stayed in place watching the man. Indeed, his eyes followed me the whole time, completely ignoring Carl. When Carl came back, he confirmed it. Robert, that man is definitely watching you specifically, he said. When I left he didn't pay me any attention. His eyes were fixed on you. What do we do? Be very clever. Get up and walk toward the elevator. I'll stay here and see if he follows you. I did exactly what Carl suggested. I got up slowly, gathered my things, and walked toward the elevator. When the doors opened, I looked back discreetly. The man in the green shirt had gotten up from his place at the bar and was walking in my direction. I quickly entered the elevator and pressed the button for the 12th floor where Carl's cabin was. When the doors closed, I felt a rush of temporary relief, but also a terrifying confirmation: Michael definitely had someone watching me on the ship. 15 minutes later, Carl arrived at the cabin. "Robert, you're right. That man followed you to the elevator. When he saw you'd gone up, he also took the next elevator. He's definitely suspicious. What do we do now?" "If Michael has someone here, you're in real danger," Carl said. "We're going to be smarter than them." We sat at the little table in his suite and began to plan how to turn suspicion into proof that would hold up not just in my notebook but in a court of law. The man in the green shirt thought he was hunting easy prey. He didn't realize he'd just walked into an older man's ledger. Carl and I spent that evening like two old chess players, moving pawns around an invisible board. The man in the green shirt had confirmed our worst suspicion: Michael hadn't just left me vulnerable, he'd planted someone on the ship to finish the job. We didn't know whether this man was a hired killer or a bribed crew member posing as a guest, but we knew he was circling. Carl poured us each a cup of weak coffee from the cabin's little machine. "You're doing everything right, Robert," he said. "We're not guessing anymore. We're collecting." "I just keep thinking about how casual Michael sounded," I murmured. "Like he was planning a weekend barbecue, not my funeral." Carl nodded. "It's always cold when money's involved. He thinks you're still a naive father who'll walk right into it." We decided we needed the man to expose himself. Not in a dramatic showdown but on paper, on audio, with witnesses. The best way to do that, Carl said, was to make him feel safe, like the predator approaching prey that can't fight back. The next morning, I dressed like an easy mark: Hawaiian shirt, floppy hat, a slight stagger as though I'd had one too many mimosas at breakfast. I even smeared sunscreen on my nose so I'd look ridiculous. Carl went ahead to the casino and sat at a poker table near the entrance where he could see me. I chose a slot machine near the edge of the room, slipped a few coins in, and pretended to lose track of myself. Within 20 minutes the man appeared, this time in a yellow shirt but with the same build and eyes. He strolled over with a smile that didn't reach them. "Excuse me, sir," he said, "are you okay? You seem a little tired." "Oh, yes," I replied, slurring my words just enough. "Think I had too many mimosas at breakfast. These vacations are driving me crazy." He smiled. I saw in his eyes he'd taken the bait. "Is this your first time on a cruise?" "Yes. My son gave me this trip as a gift. Says I need to relax." I gave him exactly the line I knew he wanted. What a thoughtful son. "And where is he now? On the cruise too?" No. He stayed in Chicago. This is just for me. A special gift so I can relax completely." The man nodded, eyes gleaming. "Well then you have to make the most of it. Have you explored the whole ship yet?" "Almost everything," I said, laughing like a tipsy fool. "Yesterday I was on the upper deck watching the sunset. It's beautiful, but it's a little scary being so close to the water." "Scary? Why?" "Oh, it's that I'm very clumsy," I said, still acting. "Always afraid of getting too close to the railings. With this rocking of the ship, you can fall so easily." His expression changed subtly. It was as if he'd received valuable intelligence. "You're right to be careful," he said, his voice now more calculating. "Especially at night. The decks get slippery with the sea moisture." "Really? Oh, how terrible. Well, then I'd better stay in my cabin after dinner." "What floor is your cabin on?" There it was, the question we'd been waiting for. "On the 8th floor, 847, I said. "It has a beautiful balcony, but as I said, I'm afraid to lean over too much." The man smiled in a way that chilled my blood. "Well, sir, it was a pleasure meeting you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your cruise." He got up and walked away quickly. From my position I could see him head directly to the ship's public phones. Carl had observed the entire conversation from his poker table. When the man walked away, Carl also got up and followed him discreetly. 15 minutes later Carl came back to find me with an expression of urgency on his face. "Robert, we need to talk immediately in private." We went quickly up to his cabin. Carl locked the door and spoke in a low voice. "That man made a call immediately after talking to you." I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I clearly heard these words: "Yes, he's in 847, 8th floor with balcony. He said he's afraid of getting close to the railings." Perfect for what we need. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Carl, are you absolutely sure of what you heard?" "Absolutely, Robert. That man is definitely working with Michael, and now he knows exactly where to find you and how to make your death look like an accident." I sat on the sofa, feeling the weight of reality falling like an avalanche. What do we do now if Michael has someone here and that someone already knows how he plans to kill me? "We're going to get ahead of them," Carl replied with a determination that steadied me. "Robert, you're not going to set foot in your cabin again for the rest of the trip. You're going to stay here with me where you're safe. But more importantly, we're going to set a trap." "What kind of trap?" "Tomorrow night is the captain's gala party. Everyone will be in the main hall until late at night. That will be the perfect night for someone to try to enter your cabin or wait for you on your balcony." "Carl, I'm not going to use my life as bait." "You won't need to. We're going to use this opportunity to catch that man red-handed. We're going to notify ship security. We're going to set a trap. And we're going to get irrefutable evidence of what's happening." That afternoon while we planned our strategy, my phone rang again. It was Michael, but this time his voice sounded different, more anxious. "Dad, how are you? Are you enjoying the cruise?" "Very well, son. Every day is a new adventure. Are you still sleeping well in your cabin? Haven't had problems with noise or anything?" A very specific question, as if he were verifying if I was still using my cabin. "No, son. I sleep perfectly. My cabin is very quiet." "That's good, Dad. Tomorrow is Thursday, isn't it? Do you have special plans?" "I think tomorrow is the captain's gala party. It's going to be very elegant." "Oh yes. Those parties are beautiful. Are you going?" "Of course. I already have my green suit ready." "Perfect, Dad. Enjoy a lot. What time do those parties usually end?" Another very specific question. Michael was collecting information about my schedule. "I'm not sure. Probably late after midnight." "Well, when it's over, go straight to your cabin to rest. Don't walk around the decks at night. It can be dangerous." Carl looked at me with wide eyes. Michael had just given me specific instructions to go directly to my cabin after the party, the exact place where someone would be waiting for me. "Don't worry, son. I'll go straight to my room after the party." "Perfect, Dad. I love you very much. Sleep well." When I hung up, Carl and I remained silent for several minutes. "Robert," he finally said, "that conversation confirms everything. Michael knows exactly when the attack will be. He probably told that man himself that tomorrow night after the gala party, you'll be alone in your cabin." "Carl, I'm scared. This plan is becoming very real, very dangerous." "I know, Robert, but we're also very close to having all the evidence we need. One more night and we'll have enough to send Michael to jail for the rest of his life." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every movement of the ship reminded me how vulnerable I was in the middle of the ocean. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years, an inner strength, a fierce determination not to let myself be defeated. Michael had completely underestimated his father. He'd made the mistake of believing I was a defenseless old man who would give up easily. Tomorrow night, he was going to discover how wrong he was. The next day passed like the long intake of a breath before a fight. The ship moved lazily between two Caribbean islands, the sun glittering on water so blue it almost looked fake. But under the glitter, a net was tightening. Carl and I spent the morning with the head of ship security, a stocky man named Tom Morales. We didn't walk into his office waving our arms, we walked in with our stack of numbered exhibits. Carl introduced himself calmly and then slid the folder across the desk. Inside were my printouts, itinerary with no return flight, insurance policy showing Michael as beneficiary, screenshots of texts and call logs, Carl's handwritten witness statement, and a transcript of the overheard phone call about 847, and perfect for what we need. Tom read each page slowly. When he looked up his face had gone hard. "If even half of this is true," he said, "your son and whoever this man is have committed conspiracy to murder on international waters. That's a very serious crime." "I'm not asking you to arrest my son," I said. "I'm asking you to keep me alive long enough for the evidence to stick." Tom nodded. "Tomorrow night is the captain's gala. Everyone will be dressed up, lots of photos, lots of noise. If someone's going to try to act, they'll pick a moment when staff are distracted." "That's what we thought," Carl said. "We want to use that as a trap." Tom leaned back in his chair. "We can place a hidden camera in your cabin. And I'll post 2 plainclothes officers near your door. You don't go back there. We'll let the predator come to you." I felt both relieved and sick at once. "And if he tries to throw someone overboard?" "Then we'll be waiting," Tom said. "And we'll have video and audio to go with your documents." We left his office with the plan in place. All day Carl and I moved like actors rehearsing a final scene. I stayed out on deck where everyone could see me, laughed too loud at Carl's jokes, made small talk with strangers. I wanted the man in the green shirt to believe I was relaxed and predictable. By evening the ship had transformed. The crew strung golden lights around the grand hull. Musicians tuned their instruments. Passengers emerged from cabins in glittering dresses and tuxedos, the scent of perfume and cologne rolling like a tide. Carl helped me into my best suit, a green one I'd kept for weddings and funerals, and straightened my tie. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I raised a son by myself," I said. "I've been sure of harder things." We entered the gala together, blending into the crowd. I ate slowly, drank only water, and kept my phone in my pocket. At 11:45 p.m., when the music swelled and the captain made his toast, Carl nodded to me. It was time. I walked toward the elevators as if heading to my cabin. I knew the man would follow. I could almost feel his eyes on my back. In reality, Tom's 2 plainclothes officers were already stationed near cabin 847 and a hidden camera had been installed behind the drapes. Another camera was fixed above the balcony, its tiny lens disguised in the molding. Carl stayed behind to watch. He later told me the man waited a full 30 seconds after I left, then set down his drink and followed at a casual pace. He took the elevator 1 car behind mine. When the elevator doors opened on deck 8, I didn't step out. I went up 1 more floor, to Carl's suite where Tom and 2 security staff were waiting with monitors. On the screen we saw my cabin door. The corridor was quiet. Then the man appeared. He looked both ways, then swiped a stolen card through my lock. The door clicked open. He slipped inside, closing it behind him. We watched on the hidden camera as he walked straight to the balcony door, pulled on gloves, and produced something from his pocket, later identified as a vial of liquid tranquilizer. He set it on the table and checked the railing as if testing its height. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Yes," he said in a low voice. "He's not here yet, but I'll be ready. Don't worry. By the time they finish the gala he'll be gone." That was enough for Tom. He nodded at his men. They moved fast. In less than a minute the cabin door burst open and 2 security officers rushed in. The man spun, but they were on him before he could reach his pocket. He was pinned to the carpet, the vial rolling under the bed. One officer snapped handcuffs on his wrists while the other read him his rights under maritime law. In the monitor room, my knees went weak. Carl put a hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not until Michael is the one in those cuffs." Tom's radio crackled. "We have the suspect detained. Found gloves, lock picks, tranquilizer vial, and his phone. Multiple messages from M discussing cabin 847. I exhaled. Months of sleepless nights, years of sacrifice, one overheard call, all leading to this moment on a ship at sea. Tom turned to me. "Mr. Sullivan, you've done exactly what you needed to. This is ironclad. When we dock, we'll hand him and the evidence to the authorities. And with the phone messages to M, your son is next." I leaned against the wall, staring at the flickering monitor where the man sat cuffed on my cabin floor. "He thought he'd write the last chapter," I said quietly. "But I still have the pen." Carl squeezed my shoulder once. "Then write it, Robert. Write it so it sticks." The ship kept moving under us, the waves slapping softly against steel. In the grand hall below, the orchestra played a bright tune no one would associate with a crime being stopped on deck 8. For the first time since Michael handed me the golden envelope, I felt something close to safety. Not peace yet, that would come later, but the cold clarity of a man who survived the ambush and now holds the high ground. Tomorrow we would dock. Tomorrow the man in the green shirt would be taken off in cuffs. Tomorrow, my son's messages and the recordings would go straight to the police. And tomorrow, I would no longer be the father on a one-way cruise. I would be the witness. The survivor. The accuser. But tonight, in the glow of the monitor, I simply sat down and let my hands tremble for a moment, because the ledger was almost balanced. When the ship docked the next morning, the sun rose over Miami like a clean blade of light cutting through the haze. Passengers poured off the gangway with shopping bags and tan faces. I walked behind Tom Morales and 2 plainclothes officers. Between them, handcuffed and silent, was the man who had shadowed me all week, the man who was supposed to make my accident happen. He didn't look at me. He stared at the concrete with eyes that had gone empty now that his plan was gone. In his pocket the police had found the phone that linked him to Michael, a string of encrypted messages, voice notes, bank transfers. Room 847 confirmed. Wait until gala night. No loose ends. Every message a nail in my son's coffin. At the pier, a pair of U.S. Marshals took custody. I signed my witness statement in triplicate while Tom added his own. Carl stood next to me, arms folded like a sentry. "You did it, Robert," he said quietly. "You're alive." But I didn't feel alive yet. Not until the phone call came. That afternoon, as I sat in a small office at the port giving my testimony to a detective named Harrison, Frank's friend from the Miami police, my cell phone buzzed. It was Michael. I put it on speaker. Harrison nodded to record. "Dad," Michael's voice came, bright and false. "How was the cruise? Everything okay?" I kept my voice level. "Everything was perfect, son. Sunsets, good food. But I forgot to thank you for the return ticket." There was a pause. A sharp inhale. "What return ticket?" "The one you didn't buy," I said, letting the silence fill the room. "The one your friend was supposed to send me off with." Michael stammered. "Dad, I don't know what you're." "The U.S. Marshals know. The ship's security knows. I have recordings, messages, printouts, witness statements. I know everything, Michael." His voice cracked. "Dad, Please, you don't understand. No, I said. You don't understand. I raised you. I buried your mother. I gave you every dollar I had and every hour of my life. And you tried to put me in the ocean like trash for an insurance payout. You don't ever call me Dad again. I ended the call. Harrison stopped the recording. That, he said, is going to play very well in court. 2 weeks later, back in Chicago, I watched the news feed on my laptop. Local man and wife charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and solicitation of homicide. Michael and Claire in orange jumpsuits, heads bowed as the judge read the charges. The hitman had already cut a deal, turning over every message and bank transfer. My documents, Carl's testimony, and the ship's footage sealed it. At the arraignment I sat in the back row. Michael glanced up once, as if hoping to find the weak father who always bailed him out. Instead he found a man sitting upright, a file in his lap, eyes dry. I left before the end. 3 months later the sentence came down, 20 years for Michael, 15 for Claire. No parole for the first decade. The judge used words like callous and premeditated and abuse of familial trust. Each word felt like a small brick closing the door behind them. In the weeks that followed, I sold my house, the one Michael had counted as part of his fresh start, and moved into a modest apartment near the lake. I changed my life insurance beneficiaries to a scholarship fund for children who've lost parents to violence. I began volunteering twice a week at a men's center for seniors who'd been scammed or betrayed by family. I told them my story without names, and they told me theirs. We became a little tribe of survivors. Carl and I stayed friends. We took shorter, safer trips, no balconies, no blind spots. We laughed more easily now. He never called me a victim. He called me the man who kept receipts. I also went back to my notebooks. On the last page of the spiral I wrote a new ledger. Not what I gave or what he took, but what I kept. My life. My integrity. My proof. My right to start over. I stared at that list for a long time. Then I added one more line. Myself. When I finished, I closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. I didn't need to keep it by my bed anymore. If there's a moral to this story for whoever listens, it's this: never underestimate the quiet parent who kept the papers and paid the bills. Love can make you blind, but discipline can make you free. Greed can destroy blood ties, but evidence can restore your dignity. I looked out my new apartment window at the lake, the water calm and endless. The same element my son had chosen for my grave was now the view for my second life. I felt the weight lift from my chest. I pressed record on my phone and began speaking, not for court this time but for whoever needed to hear it. My name is Robert. My son sent me on a cruise to relax, but only with a one-way ticket. He thought I'd die quietly. Instead, I lived loudly. If you're listening to this, don't be afraid to gather proof. Don't be afraid to outthink the people who underestimate you. And don't ever think it's too late to start again. I stopped recording. I smiled. For the first time in years, it wasn't a ledger that balanced the page, it was my life. And somewhere, in a cell he'd earned, Michael was learning the hardest lesson of all, that his father hadn't been prey. He'd been a witness, a survivor, and finally, justice itself.